This here is, believe it or not, a camera. Not a pebble, an aluminium egg, nor is this some shiny new slick design for Star Wars mouse droids. This is in fact a tiny video camera. And in today's video I want to show you what this cute little thing is, what it does, and talk generally about cameras and their design. Let's begin. I love cameras. No surprise to you, I suppose, if you've been following me for a while. And in this world of camera appreciators, I believe there are a couple different types of people. There are those who love to nerd out about the specs and find the camera that internally has the best tech. Then there are the people who prefer to focus on the hardware, so the internals are secondary, but the physical experience of holding a camera, its utility, its ability to take on anything is what they value primarily. And then there are those who appreciate the aesthetic, which in their opinion contributes to the physical experience of holding the camera. The utility, however, is not of primary interest. The camera ought to look good too, in order to feel an increased sense of joy when using it. Now, obviously, most people don't entirely fall into exactly one category. We're all a little mix of the three with tendencies. Personally, I would consider myself mainly a mix of the latter two categories, so the specs and such are cool and all, but I don't really find that much joy in focusing strongly on that aspect of cameras. However, when it comes to a camera's design, both from a utility standpoint and from an aesthetic standpoint, I find myself quite fascinated with both. I love a good design that is utility-oriented. My Pentax Spotmatic F, for example, I'd argue is designed in a more utilitarian manner. I would also include my Sony a7 III in this regard. However, when I compare the two from an aesthetic standpoint, I must say the Pentax takes the clear win in my opinion. The Sony is just quite boring. Ironically, it's probably my most used camera and at the same time the one that inspires me the least. It's very much just a workhorse. Whereas I have many other cameras that might be worse or less effective from a utilitarian standpoint, which however I just love using. Their unique design or special quirk is precisely what makes using them fun. For me personally, it's not always about getting the best quality image or video. The enjoyment of the process itself is important to me. At least that's just how I like to live my life, with a little more fun, I guess, to put it very simply. I mean, you know me, I do a lot of film photography. In this day and age, from a utilitarian standpoint, that is a pretty nonsensical move. But I value the tiny little visual difference, that last little bit that digital can't imitate, and more importantly, the process. I simply think it's fun. It is fun to forego convenience at times and not take my holiday photos with my phone and instead have a slightly neck-bending weight of a mechanical machine dangling on me with some plastic inside that is covered in magical chemicals that somehow capture an image when exposed to light. Now, if you do not relate to this feeling of fun that I just described, this camera is certainly not for you. However, if you're a bit like me, you might want to check this out. This is the Kyu camera. It's a tiny little video camera by a young Japanese brand based in Kyoto. I actually got to know one of the co-founders, and as he was telling me about this project he's working on, I was thinking, wow, this guy literally made his own camera brand. That's wild. Anyway, eventually he asked me whether I'd like to try it out, and so this one, a prototype, has been sent to me and we're now collaborating in this video because I genuinely think that this is a really cool project. So this video is sponsored by Kyu Camera. The idea behind the Kyu camera is to have a small minimalistic device that has one purpose: capture video clips quickly, easily, and without distracting the user too much and taking them out of the present moment. It's kind of along the thinking that led me to shooting portions of my YouTube videos with my phone. While traveling, I do not really want to fiddle around with my heavy camera and its settings to get the perfect shot. If I can get 80% of the quality with much less friction, I'll gladly choose that option. So that is a professional case. My standard of quality here on YouTube, at least I like to think, is fairly high. At least I like to keep it at a certain standard. But on a personal level, I don't really care about quality as much. What I mean is, when I'm visiting my parents at home, for example, I'm not taking my Sony with me to capture great quality videos of my time spent with them. I might shoot a couple photos with my point-and-shoot film camera and a low-quality video with my phone, not in 4K Apple log. But what if, like with the point-and-shoot film camera, I had a little device for the video, a bit like those people buying digicams and dadcams from back in the days. The Kyu camera is, in my opinion, like a modern-day dadcam. Imagine Apple, Tamagotchi, and a Nikon Coolpix had a baby. I think it would look kind of like the Kyu camera. The camera is shaped a bit like a pebble that was sharply cut off on one side. The back is made of grey aluminium, which reminds of an Apple MacBook. The front, on the other hand, is black and has literally only one button, which is why it reminded me of Tamagotchi, which has only 3 buttons. However, the front is designed in circles. The button itself is a medium-sized circle, and then above there is a display, which is a comparably big circle, and above the display is a little circle, which is the front camera. And then, I guess below the button you could count these 3 dots as circles. I'm guessing those are speakers. On the back, the circle theme continues with the main camera being one, the tiny little horn next to it 2, which I believe is probably a microphone, and then at the bottom there's this thing, which honestly I do not know what it is, but it kind of balances out the design. And then below that you can see that there's this line that goes around the whole camera as if the bottom were a detachable part of the Oh, it is. This here is the memory unit. The camera comes with a whopping 32 gigabytes of space, and you can offload it via this USB-C connection. And that's it, that's the design. And you know, while I'm not the biggest fan of minimalistic design, I love how this thing is made because it's a different approach to a camera. Quick tangent on camera designs. In your opinion, when do you think camera designs peaked? Was it back in the 50s and 60s when the predecessors of the more modern SLRs came out? Or was it precisely the SLRs of the 70s and 80s? Or is it the present, when we have mirrorless cameras and compact cameras that borrow design ideas from old classic cameras and interpret them in a new way for the modern world? In my personal opinion, one era that is close to the peak is the 80s, when Olympus was working on their XA series and Ricoh released their TF900 automatic camera. But something that is possibly considered controversial as a film photographer is that I find the actual peak design era was the 2000s. But you could generally expand this from the 90s to 2010-ish, when I feel like this whole shift from analog to digital also brought along some experimentation and playfulness. Look at this thing, for example. This is unthinkable in the 2020s, but back then, Nikon of all brands actually released this playful little gadget that is a camera. But even in the 90s already, camera manufacturers were making so many different kind of cameras. Of course, the classic SLR existed, mainly for the pros, and then there were so many variations of point-and-shoots. I don't know if this is just the nostalgia in me speaking, but I feel like we've lost that creative and playful spark that camera designs had back then. It's as if the camera brands have found the optimal design and since then have played it safe and just produced variations of the same camera. This is in part, of course, due to the fact that the casual photo snappers have moved on to the phone, and the only people left buying cameras are the pros and the enthusiasts. So this might have led to an economical tightening for the camera brands who now can't afford to be as experimental. However, when a brand releases something that is different, I've been the sad witness of the product being ripped apart by the community who seemingly only wants the sterile utilitarian workhorse cameras. While I might not be the biggest fan, I'd love that Fuji released the X-Half camera because they're trying something different, something unique. Same with the Sigma BF camera and the Pentax 17. The Pentax 17 was laughed at and the design was called ugly, but I think it's honestly quite sophisticated. It's also why I love Hasselblad's 907X camera design. It's just quite different, you know? Anyway, I'm telling you all of this simply so that you know where I'm coming from. I truly am a camera and gadget appreciator. I guess that's the Japanese in me. We sure love our gadgets. And so, naturally, when I found out about the Kyu camera, I was quite excited, and now I've been using it for a few weeks to just capture little bits of life, and it's been really fun, and I've been enjoying this little camera. So, let's talk about the experience. The Kyu Kyu camera was designed with their own philosophy in mind, which influenced decisions not just externally but also internally. You turn on the camera by pressing and holding the middle button, and then it's on and will automatically go into standby after a couple seconds. In this state, it is now ready to be picked up anytime and quickly capture a video clip. All I need to do is press the button to wake it up and then press it again to start recording. And now, do you see the circle animation? That's a bit like a timer, because this next part is the internal implementation of their philosophy. They like to focus on a just enough approach. The camera's design is just enough to make it work, the video quality is just enough to capture my memories effectively, and the recording time is also just enough. When I press the record button, the camera will record a 9-second clip, and every day it only lets me record 27 of these 9-second clips. So this is obviously sort of borrowing the idea of embracing limitation from film photography and converting that into the internal software of the camera. Personally, I have to say, I'm not the biggest fan of this particular part. It feels a little unnecessary. I'd be happy to just press record and then stop to get a clip of any length and just shoot as many as I like. But maybe that's just because I'm someone who tends to not overshoot. Their thinking behind this idea is that there are a lot of people who over-document. They literally live their lives through their phone because they are constantly filming everything. And so they want this device to limit that and force the person to film more intentionally and document only that what is necessary. 27 clips a day, each 9 seconds. And don't get me wrong, I do love this idea. For example, a common thing nowadays that I find mildly annoying is that at a concert you just see lots and lots of phones everywhere. And I definitely see myself going to a concert with the Kyu camera and just shooting 1 or 2 9-second clips with this little device. But at the same time, I would not count myself as someone who over-records everything with my phone, so that is why it feels a little unnecessary to me. In any case, during my time with the camera so far, I think there was only one day on which I came close to the 27 clips recording limit. I actually rarely shot that much, so it's plenty enough in my opinion. So this just enough approach was the team's guidance in deciding things such as the recording limit, and I suppose that was also the case for the camera quality. It's reminiscent of old digicams or even dad cams, a bit better than true old dad cams though. I think they tried to find a sweet spot of lo-fi quality from back then and the current day technology. Personally, I like it a lot. I think it could maybe even be a little worse. However, once I zoom in, it does get dramatically worse, so maybe this is a decent sweet spot. Oh, by the way, speaking of zooming, let's check out how this is actually used, considering that it only has one button. So basically, they've combined the one button with today's technological possibilities. This round display is actually a touchscreen, and so you can simply use that to zoom in and out. Apart from that, you can swipe to the side to switch to the front camera and back. When you swipe up, the camera will show you the power off button, and when you swipe down, you get a QR code reader to sync the camera up with the app. Oh, speaking of that, yes, there is a Kyu app that has a couple more features. So basically, you can plug the memory unit into your phone and import the footage into the app, where you can share albums with other people if you and your friends, for example, all have a Kyu camera. So you'd then make an album for, let's say, a group trip, and everyone's videos are collected there. However, unlike a public social media profile, this is more like a private room where you invite your friends that you shared those memories with. And then, if you'd like, the app can actually create an edit with a song of your choice to give you a final product, if you will, without needing to do any editing yourself. I think there are some great ideas here, but I'm not fully on board yet with some of the implementation. There are just some minor things that I think could be optimized. For example, I had the app make me an edit, and for my taste, it was a bit too fast-paced. So maybe a cool solution for this could be a pacing ruler on the page where you choose your song. So you first choose your song, and then you also just have this slider where you can slide from like 1 to 10 or so to determine whether you want a slower or a faster paced edit. One more thing, the final product is actually not even the edit. The team is working on a little device called the Kyu Touch, which is essentially a physical frame for your videos to be displayed in your home. But this is still in development, whereas the Kyu camera can be pre-ordered and they just recently shipped out a batch. So now, after a couple weeks of testing this camera, my conclusion is that it is a really promising project with an already cool product. It's definitely not for everyone. In fact, I'd say it's a bit niche, but it certainly fits me. There are a couple quirks and software things that I think need improving, but overall, this young Japanese camera brand I think has already made something really cool, and I love that they're actively working on something and contributing to the world of cameras. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Before saying goodbye, I would like to say a massive thank you to the lovely people supporting me and my work on Patreon. Thank you so much to each one of you. If you're interested in Lightroom presets, tutorials for color grading and stuff like that, you can check out my page via the link in the description. Also, I have a print shop, by the way, in case that is of interest to you. Also, link in the description. With that said, I hope to see you again soon. Until then, goodbye.